Let's call to order the January 4th ACSD School Board meeting. Welcome to everyone. I'd like to do introductions. So I think I can see everybody's video box. So I'll just call your name so that you could introduce yourself, starting in the upper left-hand corner of my screen. Peter B.
Peter Burrows, Superintendent.
Chip.
Chip Malcolm.
Lorraine.
Lorraine Morse.
Davina.
Savannah Behrmeyer.
Suzanne.
Suzanne Buck.
Vicky.
Vicki Wells, Director of Student Services.
Amy.
Did you just say Amy?
Yep, Amy.
Amy McGlashan.
Jory.
Rory Jacobite.
Will.
Batch Technology Director.
Jen.
Jen Newster.
Betty.
Betty Kafumbe.
Victoria.
Victoria Jetty.
Caitlin.
Caitlin Steele, Director of Teaching and Learning.
Brittany.
Brittany Gilman, Business Manager.
Andrew.
Hello, everyone. Andrew Conforti, Interim Principal at MUMS.
Jen K.
Jen Kravitz, Principal at Mary Hogan.
Nicole.
Nicole Carter, Principal, Weybridge Elementary.
Makala.
Michaela Wizzle, Assistant Principal at Mary Hogan.
Matthew.
Matthew Brankman, Principal at Bridport Central School.
Justin.
Justin Campbell, High School Principal.
Fernanda.
Fernanda Canales, Principal at Salisbury Community School.
Laura.
Laura Kiefer, Interim Assistant Principal at MUMS.
Catherine.
Kathy Deeman, Assistant Principal at the High School.
Heather.
Heather Robb, Principal at Cornwall.
Henry.
Henry Carpenter, Student Representative.
Tracy.
Hi, Tracy Harrington, Principal at Ripton Elementary.
Peter C.
Peter Conlon, Board Member.
Peg. Click yourself off mute, Peg, and say your name again. That's Peg Martin, everyone. No worries. Did I get everyone? I think I only have one screen of boxes. Good? All right, great. Thank you all very much for that. It's great to see all of these faces. As always, at this time, we would like to offer the opportunity for our public to comment. One note on this public comment session, if you have a specific comment with regards to the budget, we're going to be having another opportunity for questions and answers following the budget conversation. So please hold those questions till then. But other than budget questions, please raise your Zoom hand and we'll pull you over into the speaker view or panelist view so that you can make your public comment.
Mary, can I just clarify? You mean in tonight's meeting after the budget conversation?
Correct.
Okay, Cheryl Cesario.
Hi.
Cheryl.
Hi, hopefully I'm commenting at the right time. I mean, it's touching on the budget, but it's kind of more of like a bigger picture thing. I just wanted to comment that I thought that presentation was really thorough and made the challenges quite clear. But I do think what we really need are, at this point in time, some really creative leadership and some deep thinking. I feel like school consolidation is just like bringing in a bulldozer to fix the problem, and it isn't really a solution. There's overwhelming evidence that shows that consolidation doesn't save any money overall. It might save in some places, but incurs new costs in other areas. And I appreciated the conversation regarding the line items in the budget that could be evaluated. As noted, though, these are small items and ultimately it likely would not be enough. And so it amounts really to pruning twigs. So what lays before us seems to be two choices: use a bulldozer or clip the twigs. But it's kind of a false choice. And what's needed is to come in with a chainsaw and cut out the dead wood. We need to dig deeper into the expenses and see where the dead wood lies. And I would say that, just as a side note, cutting out new, energetic, and inspiring teachers like we're doing in the Cornwall School is not the dead wood. I think a modern school board needs to be more like a business and less like a bureaucracy. If a business is looking at profitability and they've removed the dead wood and it's not enough, then they have to increase revenue somehow. I sit on the board of a statewide nonprofit. They raise funds through both monthly recurring donations and also through an annual appeal. They do that through a development director who cultivates donor relationships. It was mentioned in the presentation that to maintain the status quo, there's a $500,000 shortfall, and the taxes would go up $350 for somebody with a $300,000 home, or like $250 for somebody who made $80,000. I would just say, first of all, that I'm below both of those. However, if the school district was run like a nonprofit or had a subsidiary nonprofit like Friends of the Addison County School District, I would gladly contribute a monthly $100 donation to keep the small schools open. It sure would be a lot cheaper than a private school. Obviously, we have families in the county who could not do this, but there are many who can. And those relationships will be cultivated by a fundraising or development director whose salary, by the way, would be included in their money-raising efforts. Additionally, in the last 2 weeks alone, 3 of my neighbors, all with adult children, so no kids in the school system, have come to me and said, "What can we do to keep the schools going?" These are the type of people who would contribute to an annual appeal, $100, $200, maybe $500. Again, these would be cultivated relationships seeking out people who care. And how they care and how you get people to care is through compelling stories and direct requests for giving through developed relationships. And I just would lastly say, if you're sitting here thinking of 5 ways this would not work, I'd ask you later to instead think of 5 ways it could, or think of your own unique and creative idea to increase revenues for our school system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nothing else right now.
Okay, great. Thank you all very much, as always. Next on the agenda, recommendation to approve the minutes of December 21st. Do I have a first motion to approve? Or Chip?
I have a motion to approve, but I have some minor corrections.
Okay, 1 second then. And second motion? Amy McGlashan, second. Comments or discussion on the minutes? Go ahead, Chip.
I have just one comment on, and the way it is printed out on my printer, it's page 3, but I don't know whether it's truly page 3. It's under Report of Superintendent, discussion of ACSD fiscal year budget draft, and it's the second paragraph. Larger picture tonight and more details in January. I'm almost sure a lot of what is in this paragraph I said. I don't need to be quoted, but I think it should be distinguished that it was a board member or a board person who was making these comments. And I just felt that I could not tell that from the way this flowed. And I thought it was important because I remember saying some of these words. So that's the reason I bring it up.
Okay.
And the second the second is really just a word, and it's on the last page, page 7. And it has to do with individual town votes would not be commingled, whatever. In the first paragraph, it says to do indeed vote to succeed, okay? Well, obviously, they are seceding. That word is also used above it if 2 towns do secede rather than succeed. So those there are obviously very different meanings to those words. And those should be corrected, I would hope.
Great. Any other comments on the minutes? So motion to approve the minutes with the note of recognizing board member comments as board member comments and changing succeed to secede
2 times, right?
2 times. All those in favor? Aye.
All right.
All those opposed? Great, so moved. Next up, ACSC bills.
Bills were read today. That's the only time since the last meeting. There are 2 accounts that were paid. One out of the general account of $264,544.28 out of the general fund, and out of the Mary Hogan, I can't think of the name of it now, but that was $550. That's at McGilton Fund, I'm sorry. $550 out of the McGilton Fund. So I move that those bills are correct and be paid. I presume, again, like I always say to Victoria, whether she read them too. So
I did,
that's a motion to approve the bills.
and I'll second it.
Great, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great, so moved. And next on the agenda is the report of the superintendent. So I'm going to turn this over to you, Peter.
Thank you. So tonight, as Chip mentioned, we are going to be hearing with more specificity about the budget, and who better than to share that specificity than the folks that are leading in our buildings. So they are all here. It is great to see all of you here on the screen. Wish we were in person. And they're going to be presenting, you know, basically kind of a short runway into FY22. Some of the things that are potentially shifting in the budget related to their school. They'll be talking about grades and grade configurations. They'll be talking about programs. So different things from different schools, you know, really germane to the current budget and the work that we've done in developing this for this year. So we're going to start out with that. We're going to then transition to further detail on tax implications. So Brittany's got a document she's going to share, and we'll be walking us through that. Following that will be, as Mary mentioned, will be the question and answer, where we can take questions from folks that are tuning in and respond to those questions. And that can be both folks at the central office and also principals too, who have some of the more specific information at the building level. So we're going to start out, I figured it would be good to start out at elementary, and we're going to go alphabetical today. So Matthew, you are, as B, Bridport, you are first. So we're going to go Bridport, then Cornwall, etc. So principals, you know your spot in the lineup, and then we'll go to MUMS and then to MUHS.
I knew I should have been a high school principal. Hi, everybody. I'm Matthew Brinkman. I'm the principal at Bridport. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit tonight. There aren't many changes other than the big one, which is our 6th graders will be going to MUMS next year. So looking at numbers, we're looking at about 57 students total, pre-K to 5th grade. And we know for sure we'll have a standalone pre-K, and we know for sure we'll have a combined 4th and 5th. Right now we're in conversation, and we're gonna kind of pause and wait and see how staffing plays out to figure out the middle grades and what the best way to split those are. Other than that, the biggest thing that we're doing is our farm to school program. We're partnering with Shelburne Farms, and this has been an absolutely atrocious year to start that. But our teachers and our guidance counselor and our partners at Shelburne Farms are finding ways to look at farm to school. We're going to make a map this year of all of the farms in Bridport and kind of look at everything that's produced in our local area. And we'll start working on gardens and more fun projects when we are able to, when the weather's better and when everything's better. So that's just an overview of Bridport. Thank you.
All right, so it's Cornwall's turn. I'm Heather Robb. I'm the principal at Cornwall. And my notes just disappeared. There they are. I do want to refer to them. I have a feeling, though, that we're going to say a lot of similar things. This year, we've all dealt with a lot of changes. Despite the concerns for health and safety, we did have an increased enrollment this year. If you count our kids in the remote academy, we did have 90 kids this year. But with students going next year, both the 5th and 6th grade to MUMS, it's anticipated that we will have about 74 for next year for kindergarten through 5th. When that happens, we do have 2 classes that are small, who we could consider blending and combining with another class. However, the classes on either side of those classes are large. So as of now, we will not have any blended classes next year. We anticipate that we will have 6 sessions or 6 standalone classes from kindergarten through 5th grade. The staffing changes are hard, and that's what we started talking about together with the staff and teachers just before break. But 2 of the teachers who we have hired in the past 2 years will lose their positions because of their seniority or low levels of seniority. And as I said, that is hard. Teachers at Cornwall are very close, and they support each other, and they help each other, and they learn from each other. So it's not just hard for those losing the jobs, but for the others as well. But I also know that those same teachers who are staying behind, as they will be very, very supportive and welcoming to the teachers who are then reallocated from other elementary schools in order to fill those vacancies. And we've only talked about it a little bit, so that'll be continuing group effort through the rest of the year. What else? Systems are going to remain relatively unchanged, although a lot of changes happened this year because of the pandemic, some of which we will want to continue. The emphasis on spending time outdoors, the emphasis on developing a rhythm between academic content and movement and outdoor learning, that rhythm has proven to be very, very beneficial for student engagement, as well as for reducing unexpected behaviors. That, along with a real focus on social emotional learning, which both of those things we've always known are important, but this year they've come to the forefront as being critical. And so those are things that we will want to continue to make priorities as we continue past the pandemic into hopefully more regular schooling and learning. And that's it. Thank you.
So I'm Jen Kravitz. I'm the principal at Mary Hogan. So as we look forward to the 2021-22 school year, there are going to be some changes at Mary Hogan, but the overall learning and supports for students will remain robust and grounded in our core values of belonging, connection, growth, and respect. As both Heather and Matthew said, the biggest change coming next year involves the 6th grade moving to MUMS. It involves a change in the number of class sections and some staffing. It's projected that our pre-K 5th through 5th grade school will be approximately 385 students, which is down from 443 this year. There are no changes to the pre-K section, so there'll be 2 sections that are open to 3- and 4-year-olds. And there will be 21 total sections in K through 5th grade, which is a loss of 4 sections, which is what is in the current 6th grade. It does mean, though, that our class sizes will remain the same and remain stable next year. The loss of 4 classrooms and 4 classroom teachers with the move of the sixth grade to mums will obviously have an impact on the school. And the classroom teacher reductions will be based on the seniority list, as well as reallocation of those teachers to other schools within ACSD that have openings due to RIFs. And the moves will be determined later on in the spring after it's clear who's retiring and what positions are open and what are the best fits. So principals and Peter and Vicky and Caitlin and Brittany will all be working together to figure out those best fits. And I guess I just want to say, like, despite those changes, the overall student experience at Mary Hogan should remain strong and build on our systems and practices that we established last year and this year during the pandemic. So we're going to continue to work on how we're supporting students with social, emotional, and academic needs. Next year's budget will keep the same FTE of our SEL support as well as our academic interventionists. And both of those are teams that have been working really diligently to both make sure that we have systems and are making decisions based on data and student need, as well as providing early intervention so that we can close gaps early on. And then we'll also continue to foster our outdoor learning and transdisciplinary inquiry in all of our classes. So, thanks.
I think it's my turn. If I'm wrong, let me know. Ripton?
That's what I said.
Tracy Harrington, that's what you got? Okay, I went over it a couple times. So I really don't want to repeat what everyone else has said, so you've done such a great job. I can add that Ripton will also look different with the sixth graders moving to mums, and we are looking at reducing our classroom teaching staff from 4 to 3. We know that teacher will be reassigned within the district due to seniority, and we don't know, as other people have mentioned, who it will be based on the vacancies in the areas of strength that our teachers have. Because each teacher at Ripton teaches 2 grades, we also need to reduce another grade. So due to cost-related reasons, we're cutting pre-kindergarten. And I want to add that I am hopeful that we will find or create some options for pre-kindergarten students that they can find in the area that they would have come to Ripton, and they won't be next year. We are anticipating having about 36 students, kindergarten through 5th, and all other staffing is anticipated to stay the same, although some specialized positions like special education and speech therapy may change depending on student need. That's all I've got.
Thank you.
I think it's my turn. I'm Fernanda Canales, and I'm the principal at Salisbury Community School. And yes, much of what you've heard is true for Salisbury as well. We are, as we look forward to next year, we will be losing 16 students with our 6th grade graduates plus our 5th grade going into 6th grade, which will leave us at about 70 students school-wide. So we will be reallocating a teacher to one of the openings in one of the other schools. We have a combined group of about 18 students in a grade 2-3 next year, and all the other groups will be single grades. We will not be having a preschool kindergarten combination next year. Between all of the challenges that have already been discussed, plus curriculum for kindergarten and different licensing requirements for preschool, we feel it's been a difficult fit for us these last 2 years that we've tried the pre-KK together. I have been working with Meg Baker and some of my other colleagues and just spoke to her about UPK. She's the UPK coordinator, and she feels that there is room in other preschool programs in the area that would be able to take our Salisbury students. And we're looking at other options as well. So We also will be having one less paraprofessional next year, but this cut will be met by attrition. We have a paraprofessional that has just recently left, and we will not be filling that position. So I do have to say that having a teacher reallocated for the second year in a row has a reverberating impact on our staff and our school communities. There is an emotional toll that people are feeling right now with each shift. And, you know, I do see a need to create class sizes that can support more stability year to year throughout the ACSD. So I think that that's something to continuously be working on. Teachers have expressed an interest in engaging in problem solving and imagining what is possible as well. And I would encourage the board to include their voices in the process. And I am looking forward to continuing our work. This has been for Salisbury an interesting year for all of us, right? But we have had many, many wonderful moments. Although we have not had a chance to properly celebrate being authorized as an international baccalaureate school, we do still continue to collaborate with ACSD counterparts in using a common platform that can be accessed both remotely and in person. So there's been a lot of gains. The safety guidelines have also encouraged us to spend more time outdoors. Students in grade 3 through 6 build their own outdoor learning spaces, including personalized desks and benches. And our outdoor tents have also extended our time outside. And all of these opportunities to explore our grounds and spend time in nature have enriched our learning experiences. So we have always been a school that has had a forest classroom, but we've expanded this to all of our grades, these experiences, and it's been very positive. So student voices are heard throughout the school, and these reflect deep caring, creativity, and kindness. Our 5th and 6th graders run virtual all-school meetings, and some have made videos of books for younger students to enjoy. Today at our faculty meeting, we were really discussing, you know, creating a list of our gains and things that we would like to keep from this experience, because there's many things that we have put into place that actually have worked well, and we did it according to, you know, due to need, not and it cost us to be creative. So I'm very, very grateful to be where I am. This is my 15th year at Salisbury, and I look forward to what comes next. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mike Lennox at the Shoreham Elementary School. And as I was thinking about what I was going to say tonight, I thought about how silly it is to be thinking that I'm going to project into what next year is going to be, when this time last year we were about 6 and 8 weeks from everything getting upturned on us. But it looks like most things are going to remain consistent next year. This year we have about 99 students. Next year I'm anticipating having 95 students. Our smallest class currently is our 6th grade class, so I think that's going to average out. Currently we have a blended 5th and 6th grade class, but next year it looks like the correct numbering is a single grade for each level. So we'll have a K, a 1, 2, 3, a 4, and a 5. And as everyone has said, the pandemic has helped us really focus on what is key to our school. As we've had to pare things away, it became clear what's really important. So I'm looking forward to next year and leaning heavily into that clarity as we start to scale back all of the things we've pared out. And the biggest impact, as other people have echoed, is the impact on our staff that may have to be let go to make room for the move to 6th grade. So we currently have 6 classroom teachers, and 3 of those classroom teachers may need to find other work. So when half of the staff is impacted, that'll be a shift, but everything else is going to remain consistent, and I'm looking forward to next year.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nicole Carter, Principal of Weybridge. And Weybridge next year is looking at a total enrollment of about 36. This year it was 39. We'll have 3 multi-age classrooms, which is what we have this year. The biggest difference is this year we have a K1-2, and next year we'll have a K1, a 2-3, and a 4-5. Most of our systems will stay the same. We're hoping we can keep outdoor learning. It's been fabulous. We're looking forward to revitalizing our community connections, reviving our cross-grade collaborations, and continuing to focus on UDL, anti-racist curriculum, student agency, a host of wonderful things that are happening despite all that is occurring around us. We will be losing 2 staff members due to a reduction in force, and we will be gaining 1 teacher from the district through reallocation. So there will be some changes to staffing. This has been shared with staff, and we are working with the loss and the grief. I think overall, Weybridge is continuing to find ways to connect, to make the best of a difficult situation, and to really embrace outdoor experiences. So all in all, it's feeling pretty grounded at Weybridge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe before, Andrew, before you go, it might be helpful to just share a little bit about the process that people are talking about that some people might not know about. So when we became a unified district, or previously when we were 8 separate districts, every district held its own seniority list. And a seniority list is when you're part of an association or a union, for every year you work, you accrue a year of seniority. And that's essentially like a tenure process in some ways. It's job security. So when there is a reduction, previously when there was a reduction in a school, the seniority list was only if it was in Salisbury or Ripton or at UD3, it would only occur within that district. Now, if you're a teacher, let's say you're an 8th year teacher in a school in a unified district, you now have seniority across the whole district as opposed to in one school. So the process we are going through and the process that the elementary principals have been working on with staff over the last month has been to look at those 7 FTE that are being reduced as a result of the 6th grade move. And I mean, it's not just the 6th grade move, but it's also the redesign of MOMS as well. The new 6th through 8th grade model at MOMS. It's not the those 7 FTE are the 7 employees that are lowest on the seniority list. So there is some movement that we're going to have to do. You heard some principals talk about we're losing 2 and we're gaining 1 or things like that. That means that there's an employee from another school that needs to be reallocated to another school. They have rights to that position. So I just wanted to share that just to help provide a little bit of sense of kind of the process that we have to go through to figure out kind of where everyone lands. Andrew, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Hello, everybody. It's a good segue into where we're at with MUMS as far as next year goes in terms of process. Presenting the new schedule to the board in October, and since then, really Chris Francoeur working on potential configurations and the movement of staff within our building to meet the new design, largely going to 3 teams over 3 grades. Calls for a lot of changes in our building just on a system alone, let alone bringing in the 6th grade, which nearly doubles our grade sizes to 120 at most, but still keeping our class sizes no greater than 20. This is something that is an adjustment for our staff and our community, but with those larger grade sizes also, this design we're really excited about larger teams. With this design, we're still able to have teachers have 1 prep, so they're still dedicated to that grade level curriculum in the core areas, with the exception of language acquisition, design and art, teaching multiple grades for them. But at the same time, we're adding a PE teacher to each team dedicated, We'll have 3 guidance counselors, 1 dedicated to each grade level. So we feel really good about strengthening those teams, even though they're seeing larger numbers of students per team. And one thing that we're really excited in talking about planning, one of the key things that we need to do is really bring our staff up to speed on what our schedule actually looks like and how that impacts them. We'll be moving to a waterfall schedule, which we could spend more time on that alone, but really teaching how that affects seeing students at different times of day to maximize them seeing all different subject areas to maximize the opportunity for them to be at their best, given that people will adjust based on the timing. More specifically, what we're working on right now in terms of planning is developing the 6th grade as far as bringing that into MYP. Our teachers, we redistributed our early release time so that they can meet twice a month now to plan for that. We have an advisory group that'll join them 2 additional times. We already met once. That includes elementary teachers, high school teachers, and administrators to help support and inquire about what this looks like and how this impacts our curriculum from pre-K to 12, really, in terms of pace and design and rigor, and what it looks like to have 6th grade be a part of the MYP. So there's a lot of inquiry and discussions to be had. And with that is a lot of opportunity to hear from our teachers and utilize our strengths and our areas of expertise with that. What other things here? One thing that we're really excited about, another thing with planning, is Wednesdays is a very unique thing in terms of our waterfall schedule will still be students having their regular schedule on Monday, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, and that being a part of the waterfall. But on Wednesdays is being a locked schedule where we're going to offer an interdisciplinary unit for each grade, a skills for life that's a dedicated time for students to get specific SEL instruction that's going to be informed by district level initiatives, and then also within our own building and what our students' needs are specifically, and then exploratory, kind of playing off some of the things that the elementary is talking about with kind of bringing some of the silver linings of this year. Our teachers have really benefited from that break in the week with that Wednesdays, and we feel like this kind of holds to that spirit, and I think it'll be really beneficial to our students. But it also comes with a lot of challenges, and with those challenges comes great opportunities to get input from our teachers, get input from our families. I look forward to meeting with our community partnership that will be starting this month with members to talk about what can be done at these times and how can we be creative to use this time on Wednesdays, especially next year. And how do we help get our students that are coming from the 5th and 6th grade with transition is a big factor in getting us off on the right foot in the fall and getting that input, using our own student ambassadors this year and getting them more involved in how to support, one, bringing in the 5th and 6th grade, but also memorializing what we're experiencing loss at the middle school as well. You know, we have 4 different teams that will no longer be as they are, and that is something that our staff is also dealing with, having staff move to different positions than what they're currently used to, or being moved on to different teams and having different roles, but also having a great opportunity to come together to help redefine roles as needed, make sure that we carry on the things that we really value at MUMS and that we don't want to lose. And I think we have an opportunity to really make sure that we hold on to the strengths and things that we really cherish at MUMS, but also build on things that we feel like we have an opportunity to build on, and then add things in that we feel like have been missing. So there's a lot that still needs to be done in the second half of this year, but we're also really excited about the opportunity. We feel like having 3 years with 6th through 8th really gives us that extended period of time that we'll really value, and I think our families will really benefit from, and our students really benefit from, and we're really excited about the challenges and the opportunities that they bring. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's Justin Campbell, principal of the high school. I guess I have the luxury next year of being the only school where there are no grades coming or going. So a little more status quo for us. But I thought I'd share some of the things that Kathy and I and our team have been thinking about. And I think I'd start by saying, as we look towards next year, we're hoping and imagining that we're going to be in sort of more of a recovery phase from COVID. Obviously, this unique time, our teachers, our staff are doing amazing work, but educationally, we anticipate our students having gaps that have been created by this time. So one area that we're really thinking about is kind of recovery, educational recovery planning, I'm going to call it, and schools across the state and across the nation are kind of in the same place. So more to come on that, but certainly imagining likely a long-term effort to both identify gaps in student skills and knowledge and really work to plug those gaps. It might be, enhancing some summer programming. It might, be reallocating our resources at the high school. But certainly that's at the top of our list. And similarly, I anticipate. So that's kind of the academic side. I anticipate in the social emotional side, also needing to be really cognizant over the next few years about the toll that this time has taken on all of us, but certainly our students. So thinking about mental health supports and also sort of whole school efforts. I've always worked at the high school level, and you think about high school as 4 years, and so we've had or will have kind of this year plus. Again, hoping that we're in a different phase next year, this year plus disruption, and that sort of an interruption can really cause us, I think, to maybe forget who we are as a school. It sounds silly, but you're graduating multiple classes, you're bringing in new classes, so I think we really need to pay attention to our core values, who we are, and kind of thinking whole school about that. Again, that SEL work that we do as being really very important. And then shifting gears a bit and thinking from the curriculum end, this is we're working with our senior classes, the first cohort to walk through this IB curriculum that we've put in place. And so I think as our staff has done that, there's a number of departments who are wanting to dive back into their curriculum and really do some substantial work. And I'd like to be able to support them in that. So currently I've been talking with, Kathy and I have been talking with the math department, the language acquisition department, and the individuals and societies departments. Other departments are also, everyone is always thinking about curriculum, but these three departments are really thinking about, I think, focusing on the MYP progression. We've got 6th grade injected into that mix. So really thinking back on that MYP, what will now be for us a 5-year progression, and now that we've really been through it and we're seeing where our students are, going back and kind of fine-tuning that going forward. We've also got lots of other work in the area of curriculum, instruction, and assessment, thinking about our grades 11 and 12. Do we want that to move to a proficiency-based grading system? We had our first. This group that is coming up through, they've always had that proficiency-based system, and now all of a sudden they're jumping back to A's, B's, C's, D's. So where do we want to go with that? So a lot of thinking going on for us, and I'll be sure whenever there's time to keep you all updated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brittany, do you want to present, and then we can kind of hand it back to Mary, and Mary can take us through the questions and things like that?
Could I just ask one question just regarding seniority, just to clarify?
Yep.
The seniority question, which is always controversial in any system, obviously, was a negotiated component of unification, correct?
Yeah, we worked on, we basically took the seniority list from all 8 districts and we melded them into one list.
But that was
We
with,
did that with the association, so
With
it's
the
something that we
association.
work on together. We problem solve together. We send our seniority list every year to the association per the contract for review. So it's something that we take care of it together, essentially.
okay. I just wanted to make sure you clarified that. The second question is that if someone is going to be, quote, reallocated to a different school in a different teaching grade or whatever, and decides that they do not accept that and leave, okay, or deny that movement, then their slot is then assumed by somebody else. Is that correct?
Yeah, that slot would be assumed by the next person on the seniority list who has rights to that position.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
everyone understood that, because it's always a touchy issue for sure.
And just to further clarify, when you say that has rights to that position, you mean by seniority, but also by degree or
Licensure.
or qualifications, what they're certified for?
Yeah, they have to have taught in that classification. So like an elementary classroom teacher is a classification on the seniority list. So they have to have the licensure to be able to do that, but they also, their seniority is ranked among other classroom teachers at elementary.
Okay, great, Peter. Brittany?
Okay. I'm trying to decide what might be more frustrating, when my children interrupt or when Fernanda's cat gets on top of her. Like, gotta be kids and animals. So I don't actually have a slide presentation. I just have the I think there's 3 documents which were added. They should have been on the website and on board pack. They were added late. The reason for that is that I was holding off till the 11th hour to try and see if I could get any updated information from the AOE about our equalized pupil number, and I did not. So I apologize for that late add, but everything should be there now. And I think that it will be easier for you to look at these there than it would be on a slideshow, because some of the data gets too small when you try to put it all onto a slide. So I'll talk about them. And I can still share my screen if that would be helpful. Do you want me to share my screen, Peter, or do you feel like people can just follow along?
I think sharing, sorry, I thought I was on mute. That's why I didn't finish my sentence. Yeah, I think sharing your screen is a good idea.
Okay. So,
if it will fill the screen and not flow over, because I think those documents are large, aren't they?
Yes, they are. Let's see. Excuse me. Let me try it and we'll see how it looks. Just one second.
And for those that are viewing, if you go to our website under board, you'll find it under the meeting materials. And if you scroll down under the whole pack of meeting materials, you'll see this document.
Okay, so I'm sharing my screen. How does this look? Is it helpful, or is it just too hard to see?
Can you
it's small, but
a little bit?
Yeah, let me to move you guys.
There you go.
How's that?
Perfect.
Okay, so this is draft 2. I'm calling it draft 2, but there have been very few substantive changes. One of the only changes is in the area of technical career center education. So we got our official 6th semester FTE count from the AOE. So we actually have students, in the past 6 semesters, we've had students at 3 technical centers. Primarily they're at Hannaford Career Center. But we've also had some students attend Stafford Technical Center and also a technical center in Essex, the Essex Westford School District. So that's all incorporated here. So that was a pretty slight change. Other than that, there have not been any changes to student instruction, There's a small change down here in consolidated federal program. We were just updating some of our wage and benefit information, but that is considered a cost neutral expenditure since it's accounted, the revenues are in the federal grant funds. So it's a net, that part's a net zero change to the budget. So when you take into account those minor changes, it brings our education spending to about a 1% increase, so 33 million. And our equalized pupils, we haven't gotten any updates there. So our education spending per equalized pupil is 19,254.39. There's the threshold is 18,789. So our total overage is $465. And we have $156 in exemptions per equalized pupil. That's coming in the form of debt, qualifying debt, and VISTERS, pension payments. So our net overage is $309, which brings our total dollars over the threshold to $535,000 approximately. So not much has changed there. If I do this, can you guys see that, the FY22? Yep. Okay, I wasn't sure if it was focused on just that one file or if it was
got it.
The whole screen. Okay, so the top part is what I shared last time. So it's our district tax rate. And I've just revised that to reflect our education spending per equalized pupil, slightly updated for our technical center. And so the tax rate increase for the district is roughly 12 cents, approximately 12 cents. If you look at the files that the AOE puts out, or that the Vermont Department of Taxes puts out, it goes 4 decimal places. But I think most of us think about money in terms of 2 decimal places, so I've rounded it. Down below is information that we did not have at our last meeting, so that's our CLA, which is the common level of appraisal. And if you recall, the common level of appraisal is unique to each town. So the district has one tax rate before the CLA is applied. We apply the CLA, and that's how you get your town tax rate. So some of our towns saw pretty precipitous declines in CLA. This is, related to property value and the grand list. So it's really totally outside the district. Middlebury just had a reappraisal last year, so their CLA is actually 100, which means that their tax rate will be exactly equal to the district tax rate. Salisbury is an example of a town that saw about a 6-point decrease in their CLA. So you can see the effect of that is felt. So for example, their homestead tax rate would be $2.05. That's a 25-cent increase over the current year. Now, again, this is the budget as it stands, without any additional reductions or without any use of fund balance. So it ranges, the increases range from 11 cents to 25 cents. And the lower the CLA, the greater the effect is on the tax rate. And then also the change from year to year. So the towns, Ripton, Salisbury, if it's below 90, it definitely, you're feeling it more. I think Shoreham is the only town that had a slight increase in the CLA. And then at the bottom here, I'm showing you what the effect of this would be on a $300,000 home. So for a 20-cent increase, it's $600. So it ranges from $390 to $600.
No, $750, right?
$750, sorry. And then as far as the income sensitivity, this is the same for all towns. So essentially, there's another formula for the income sensitivity. It does take into account, there is an incentive that's built in there too. It's similar to the incentive rate up here, the 2-cent and 4-cent incentive rate. I'm happy to share with you the calculation if you're interested. But it basically calculates a percentage of income that someone has to pay. So rather than taxing on the property value, it takes their income and it applies a percentage to it, and then they get a credit on their property tax bill based on that. So it's about $235. Take the incentives into account. So I think at the last meeting, the incentives weren't built in. So I think I was quoting around $250 last time. 60 to 70% of, I think the average in the state, but 60 to 70% of our tax, at least in part, based on income in our district. So that's what that looks like. I also have I also prepared a update for you. I'm going to stop sharing because I need to bring that up. I just wanted to give you an update on what our reserve funds look like and what our unaudited fund balance for FY20 looks like, to help us have the most complete picture of the budget. And I'll bring this up. And I will reshare. We have 3 reserve funds: our capital reserve, our education reserve, and our HRA reserve. And so these are our anticipated fund balances at the end of this fiscal year. So our capital reserve is fully expended. Last year, the board approved some projects from our capital reserve and a small amount from our education reserve. Those are largely completed. Our education reserve includes what was already the 2019 fund balance. And our HRA reserve is still sitting at $200,000. So our total reserve funds anticipated at the end of the year are just shy of 2.1 million. And then our unaudited fund balance from FY is 1,173,744. So typically the FY20 balance would be the balance that we would be asking voters to do something with. So either to use as in reserve funds, the voters have to approve of that, or to use as an offsetting revenue, which we talked about that ACSD has not done since we became a unified district. The districts did do that when individual districts. So the 1.1 million would be what's in play, what we need to ask voters to do with. And then once funds are in reserve, like the ed reserve and the A reserve, the board votes on how to allocate those funds. So that concludes my presentation, my update on the tax rate.
Thank you. I think now, Peter, if we do questions from the board, either for the principals or for Brittany, and then after we get through that, do questions from the public who are in attendance. Just from an agenda perspective, we still have a big chunk after this discussion with the facilities master plan timeline and some other items. So we're just going to try to be thoughtful from a timing perspective as we go through the Q&A portion of this, especially when we kind of move forward. If we get to a point where we want to pause, we'll continue that questioning at the next board meeting as well. So we want to make sure we get all the questions answered, but we also want to make sure we get through another important part of the agenda. So we'll watch that as we go. So with that, board members, questions for either the principals or Brittany. Chip.
Brittany, the estimate of taxes at the different towns and whatever is without utilizing any reserve fund as revenue. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so assuming we use something from that, those numbers would be less.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mary G.
When we're talking about 7 staff being reduced, is it how is that broken out? Is it teachers? Are there other professionals who are let go as well, or is it all in the teaching category?
The staff is all licensed teaching positions.
So we're not letting go guidance counselors, speech people, nothing else, just teachers, classroom teachers.
Correct.
Other questions? Lorraine?
Yeah, I wanted to just clarify a couple of things. I had a community member contacted me and I didn't have the answer for her. I did refer her to the finance, and I don't know if anybody heard from her or not. And she was asking me about the pre-K programs. So am I correct in hearing that Ripton and Salisbury had pre-K and are losing them? Mary Hogan and Bridport had pre-K and are keeping them, and that Cornwall, Shoreham, and Weybridge do not currently have a pre-K? That's my first question.
Yes, that's correct. So Salisbury and Ripton had pre-K combinations,
right.
And Mary Hogan and Bridport had historically had standalone pre-Ks. So the programs that are being eliminated are the pre-K combinations, and we're maintaining the standalone pre-Ks.
Okay.
And you're correct that the other schools that you mentioned do not have pre-K and have not in the time at least that I've been here.
Okay. And then my other question was, did I hear Nicole correctly in Weybridge that there'll be 3 multi-age classrooms and one of them is a K-1-2?
There is currently a K-1-2. So Nicole, you can speak to it probably better than I can.
No worries. Lorraine, there's currently a K-1-2 classroom, and next year there'll be a K-1.
And that was our concern in terms of keeping a pre-K program and adding, for example, at Ripton, a pre-K, K, and a 1 is a pretty significant span in terms of learning, and didn't feel like that was appropriate to have 3 grades. Something we've been talking about a lot in terms of kind of where we're headed as we look at our budget and look at staffing our schools. So that was something that we did discuss and didn't feel like that made sense from a learning perspective.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, 3 grades seems like kind of stretch. So, okay, thanks.
Other questions?
Just one other thing to add with pre-K, Lorraine, and is in talking with Meg Baker, who works for all 3 Addison County districts and is an incredible resource in working with all of our private providers. What we've heard from her, and we heard last year when I think Peter Conlon and Peter, who came to talk about pre-K last year? At Mary Johnson?
That was a group of legislators.
Yeah.
From both the Health, Human Services, the Human Services Committee and the Education Committee.
Okay.
Just to get a sense of what the situation was.
Yeah.
And
So
yeah,
what we learned there was that in talking to private providers is that really the need is birth to 3. That in terms of slots and open slots for grades for ages 3 and 4. The pre-K programs are at Ripton was 4. That that's not a shortage area in our community, and we do provide universal pre-K. So we provide, I think it's maybe up to $3,500 now in payment each year to families to support them in going to pre-K. So that's something the district is all districts are currently doing. But
sorry, I was just going to say we provide those funds directly to pre-K partner programs.
So there will be space for these pre-K programs that are not going to be able to continue. They feel.
Yeah, I mean the numbers are. I mean Tracy and Fernanda can speak to the numbers recently, but I think there are probably 4 students or so at Ripton. Is that right, Tracy? It varies every year, so it's not
I think we were looking at 5 or 6.
Okay, yeah.
But they feel like there'll be plenty of groups. So, I mean, I think that's important. I would hate to see, anybody not be able to ascertain it. Thank you.
Other questions? Brittany and Peter, could you talk a little bit about timing with regards to deciding how to move forward with the FY20 balance and where that gets allocated and how we think about kind of next steps from our ability to impact the overall budget number?
Yeah.
Do you want me to go or do you want to go?
You go ahead.
Okay. So, I mean, I think we talked about this and made a recommendation in our last meeting, just in looking at that overage, that $500,000, and looking at where we are in terms of our total reserve right now at 2 million, and feeling like, while we don't want to, and we've been really clear about not creating a funding cliff that we can't fill, given where we are this year, it seems prudent for us to put the 500,000 of that unaudited balance towards the budget to bring it below the threshold this year. Because, ostensibly what's happening is if we don't do that, then we are asking the public to put those funds into reserve or move them somewhere, but the taxation on those funds is doubled. So it's kind of like, taking out a loan, if you will. It's more expensive. The flip side of it, which we talked about last time, and which I think some people raised thoughtfully, is that it does create a gap that next year we have to make up that $500,000 in the budget, plus whatever else we need to make up to stay below the threshold. So that's the challenge of it. Again, given where we are, I think with our current reserve funds, I feel it's safe for us to do that and not put ourselves in a precarious fiscal position going into FY23. But this issue is not going away, right?
Right. Well, could you talk a little bit, either Brittany or Peter, on historically what we saw with regards to the increase from the state on the threshold number being so small?
Yeah. It's typically between, 2 and 3%. 2.5 is typically what I would use to estimate. This year it's 0.18.
Right.
So it's basically level.
And so if that was to return to a more statistically consistent number, would that help next year in addressing some of this cliff?
It will help. There will still, our expenses are still what they are, and the fund balance would be an offsetting revenue. So there's still work to be done, but it's certainly, you're not rolling the ball uphill quite as much if you have a more normal increase in the excess spending threshold. It's the lowest it's been since its inception in terms of an increase.
And is there any indication, or have you heard anything that the objective would be to return to the more normal increase, or?
Well, it's less about an objective and more about a formula. So it's a formula prescribed in statute that has to do with the NEAP, which is, an indicator of economic conditions, and statewide ADM. And my understanding is that the primary reason for the low increase this year is more related to statewide ADM than it is to the NEAP. I would hope and think that our statewide ADM, though it's been declining for years, but I think that it was probably more precipitous as a result of COVID and.
Sure. Lorraine?
Brittany, when at our last meeting you mentioned a possible $750,000 budget overage next year, were you using the traditional number that we in the past have had as opposed to this small number when you quoted that?
I think I was using 2%. I'd have to double check, but I certainly assumed an increase.
Okay. And my other question is, and you may or may not know this, but are you aware at all of how other districts are looking this year? I mean, I know, you know, times are not good, but with a $500,000 overage, are other districts looking at overages like this?
I know that okay, go ahead, Peter.
Well, I don't know statewide. You know, it's largely a result of scale. You know, if you talk to the group that we're a part of is you know, Chittenden, Franklin, Addison, and Grand Isle. So the larger districts tend to have more scale, tend to have a lower number than the smaller districts. We're somewhere in between. We've historically been high. If you look statewide over the years, we've been historically high. We were trailing our two Addison neighbors until this year. We're now above them. So they're both in, at least in my conversations with both of those districts, their numbers are below the threshold through changes that they've made.
Changes that they have made as far as like cutting?
Yeah, I mean, just, yeah, reducing budgetary expenses. And as you know, that's 80% staffing.
So to put it in perspective, this year is obviously a unique year. We have what we would consider to be a decent reserve, okay? We have a per pupil cost threshold, which hasn't really changed, which puts anybody in a problem because all the other costs, including healthcare, just the normal increase in salaries and whatever is going up more than 0.8. Or 0.18. So this, if there's ever going to be a year, because I've still not been a big one on using reserve funds, but on the other side, this obviously is a very unique time, hopefully. And per, you know, Lorraine's questions and some of her comments before too, you know, I think neither of us wanted to use that, but on the other side, these tax increases are pretty heavy. And if we're going to be double charged taxes, I just don't see how we can avoid it, putting something toward this. I don't know. Even though I don't like it, I think it's a unique time. And hopefully, Brittany, like you're saying, we will return to at least a semblance of a 2%. It can't continue like this if healthcare is 10% a year and salaries go up 3%. It just doesn't, the lines are never going to come close.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an impossibility, right? And I think the challenge of this is it's a local issue and it's a state issue at the same time. And, you know, the state has been tinkering with the funding formula for a long time, trying to suppress spending and then allow districts to kind of figure out what they're willing to spend, but the state has to raise all the funds. So it's getting to a point, I think, where, you know, this issue has to be taken up at the state level as well in terms of kind of figuring out a way forward, because it's just that challenge of the lines kind of like constantly going apart is not one that anyone can sustain long term.
Jen,
Yeah. Sorry,
go ahead.
I was just going to say that I mentioned this at the last meeting, in, you know, Peter talking about the impossibility. I mean, all districts or most districts are going to bump up on this sometime. It's just that we've, as Peter mentioned, we've historically been, you know, on the bottom of the top third, or so to speak, of the state. So we were just closer to begin with than some others.
Jen, did I see your hand?
Yes, thanks, Mary. my question is going to be about the spending threshold, but I just, in my head, I'm not sure where we stand on the pre-K issue. And I just don't know if it's something now that schools that were offering it are going to be unable to offer it, if we want to revisit that with our future discussions of the facilities master plan and trying to develop a plan moving forward, whether it's, you know, an internal school sponsored pre-K, or if it's something that we partner with the area programs. So just something to think about and maybe come back to if you all agree. And so regarding the spending threshold, looking at the budget, Brittany, is the amount, have you quantified on here, or do you have some place, or could you get the actual amount of that double tax aside? I mean, is it just because we're fully over, so everything is, you know, just split it in half, what we see as the tax, or is there some other number that I'm not seeing?
Okay, so the way that it works is when you calculate the tax, normally you would divide your education spending per equalized pupil by your property yield. So when you're over the threshold, what you have to do is take the amount, the net amount that you are over the threshold, less exemptions, and add that again to your ed spending per equalized pupil. So you need to take the number you see there and then add like $300 and use that as your numerator. Help me math people. Numerator's the top number, right? Yeah, I see all the principals like, yes, business manager, good job. And that's how you get it. So I do think that I did calculate that it's about a 3-cent effect. So if it were just to be a sort of a straight tax on that amount, it would be about 3 cents less. A little over 3 cents.
Thanks.
Suzanne?
So the one, I agree with everyone's comments about the threshold and using the dollars to keep us down. I really struggle with, you know, what things are going to look like next year, knowing that it's been recommended to use $500,000 to keep taxes down. And it's not a new issue. When Bridport was its own school district, I mean, every year, that was our conversation around the budget table, was how do we maintain services and education for what the students need, but yet stay within and underneath that threshold. And that was never a very comfortable conversation to be having, because you knew that if you calculated it slightly wrong, or an expense came in that wasn't allowed to be exempted, you were then over, and then you had to try to explain that to people. The other thing that I want to, two other things, is the CLA. Several towns have not been reappraised in years. Bridport, I think their last reappraisal was like 10 years ago. To get on the reappraisal list, it's a 3-year wait minimum. So there aren't a lot of people around that are willing to do town-wide reappraisals. So Bridport, I know, is looking to get on that list. And the other thing is, when we talk about the monies that people can get to help them with their taxes, I want to caution people that that's not just free money that's being given to them to help them out with their taxes. That's actually money that then gets added back into their tax base for the next year. So then if they get $500, all of a sudden it's like they had $500 additional income. So then they have to pay taxes on that. So I just want, you know, there's repercussions all around. But I also don't like using money to reduce, because I know next year's going to be even worse. And so I just wish there was another way out of this prickly hole.
Other questions? Lorraine?
I know at the last meeting we talked about trying to find small ways to reduce the budget. And I'm wondering, given the fact that we're going to be losing some of our younger teachers, has there been any thought, or could there be any thought to offering retirement incentives to perhaps you know, some of the more established teachers might be interested in getting done, and that way we might be able to replace them with some of the teachers who would be losing their jobs and save money in that way.
We have, because we offered early retirement district-wide, I think it was 2 years ago, and we had 25 teachers retire, which was a lot. We currently don't have very many that even could meet our old language in the contract. That language is no longer there, so we'd have to create something. So I don't think that's kind of an answer for this year. Again, if it gets to a point where there's and you know, who knows in kind of future years, but I think because we've just offered that a few years ago, and we had so many people take it, that probably now is not the time to come back out with it again, but to wait for people to get closer to be able to retire than, you know, have like 2 or 3 take that.
Just a thought.
I mean, we're also still, one thing just that we've been talking about with employees too, is that we still have some open positions. We expect we'll have a few retirements going into next year. You know, this has been a strange year for everybody. So, you know, there's a lot we can't really predict, as maybe Michael was mentioning, or yeah, Michael was mentioning in his comments. We know we have at least 1 intervention or 2 intervention positions that are going to be open that those teachers could apply for. So we're hoping that we can still keep a number of those teachers in the district, potentially not in classroom teaching positions, but in other positions too. So that's there. You know, if you look back historically through every year, there is a lot of movement that happens. You know, people move to Burlington, people leave the state, people retire, all those kinds of things happen. So you know, you can talk to any one of the principals here who has been on hiring committees. Every year we are hiring new elementary teachers. So I expect that to continue this year. So the picture may look quite different in April than it does right now.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, at this point, I think we have the opportunity to provide a Q&A option for our other attendees. And Peter, if you could give a short explanation as to where you would like them to put the question.
Well, I was thinking if they wanted to put their question in the Q&A, I believe they have access to Q&A down on the bottom of their screen.
Great. So you'll see a little Q&A box, right?
Yep. So if they put their question in the Q&A, then we can read them off. So a question from Tanya Scuteri: can you break out tax increase estimate to account for the EST?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Like what portion is because of the
I think the question
taxation?
is, like what portion of the tax increase? So if we paid down the 500,000, I believe is the question. If we paid that down, what's the?
No, that's not what she
I
said.
didn't get that correct. Tanya, I'm going to bring you over, and you can help us.
Sorry, hello.
Sorry. I thought I had it, but apparently not.
Sorry. So it's really helpful to see like the estimated increase on, say, a $300,000 home or on the income base. And I'm just wondering what would that number be if we weren't past the excess spending threshold, or if there wasn't one? What would that increase estimate be? And is that excess spending threshold affect people universally? So it would affect people based on their home value and also people who pay based on income?
It does affect both, because our education spending per equalized pupil is a component in both of those things. So any excess spending gets added into that number, the education spending per equalized pupil for double taxation. So the effect, let's say that our ed spending per equalized pupil remain the same, but the excess spending threshold wasn't a thing. Is that what you're asking? Okay,
yes,
so it was just a straight tax.
Yeah.
Yep. So the tax rate increase in that case for the district, so this isn't per town, not based on CLA, would be 9 cents. So there's a 3 cent differential. So that would be $270. 9 times 3 is 27. That'd be $270, 200 approximately.
So like for if the estimate was 600, you could say that might be only 330.
Sorry, you cut out.
The
Tanya.
excess spending threshold adds like 200. Sorry.
You're breaking up a little bit, Tanya, but I think that's okay. One of the things that we could probably do just from a Q&A perspective and get the answer on the board, Brittany, is to just show, what's allocated from an increase to the different levers that we have. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Great.
Yep. I can do something and carry it through to the towns.
Perfect.
And then I thought you had another, I guess I answered the other question, which was, does it affect income-based as well? It does affect income-based as well. And if we didn't have the excess spending threshold, I can get that number for you.
The next question is, could Peter Collins speak to how we might go about affecting change in the threshold cap at a state level? Would he be willing to advocate for that change? That's from Molly Witters.
As I said at the last meeting, there's no doubt that this issue is going to be brought up. I have a couple of bills that my name is attached to advocating for a change to better reflect the increases in healthcare and to exempt some spending on capital improvements. So I think that this will be definitely a topic and definitely something that I'll be advocating for.
Mary Heather Noble, can you please summarize again which schools will be losing newly hired staff and reallocating teachers from other schools?
Yes, I can. Let me just pull up. So Mary Hogan, Ripton, Salisbury, and Weybridge are all seeing section size reductions. So that means that, what it sounds like, they have less actual section sizes. So Mary Hogan is losing 4 sections. That's their current 6th grade. Ripton is losing 1, Salisbury is losing 1, and Weybridge is losing 1. And then in terms of reduction in force, that's related to seniority and not necessarily related to the number of teachers we need to see in the building. Cornwall is 2, Mary Hogan is 1, Shoreham is 2, and then there's a 1-year only contract, and then Weybridge is 2, and possibly 1 at Bridport, depending on the way that the seniority shifts happen. And then the schools that will need to reallocate because they lost sections but didn't have staff on the seniority list that were low enough on the seniority list to be RIFT would be Mary Hogan, so they would need to reallocate 3. And then Ripton and Salisbury would both need to reallocate 1. And then some of the other schools would be on the receiving end of that.
So John asked, it was mentioned that only teacher positions are being cut. Is this true? No paraprofessionals?
There are some reductions in paraprofessionals, but we believe that there will be no reductions in force. We believe that we can absorb those positions just based on the current openings around the district. And I believe that I highlighted that on the presentation on the last board meeting as to the number. So if you look at the slides from the last board meeting, I should have that number there.
Barb Wilson, why is the equalized pupil count targeted to be lower than this year, even though the enrollment is projected to be higher? This year, it's approximately 1747. Currently, Brittany is showing 1730. I realize this is just a placeholder, but I would expect it to be the same as this year due to the increase in enrollment. Also, I thought that I had heard somewhere that districts were not going to be penalized for enrollment declines due to the pandemic. I thought they were referring to the ADM count.
Yep, so they are referring to the ADM count. ADM is average daily membership, and that's one component of equalized pupils. It is what I would quantify as the main component. So equalized pupils is a 2-year weighted average of ADM. So the factor that, even if enrollment looks like it's the same, that can change is the weighting. So an elementary student typically is weighted at 1. So 1 student, 1 equalized pupil. But secondary students are weighted up at 1.4. Pre-K students are weighted down to 0.46. We also get additional weighting for students in poverty as well as English language learners. And then all that is rolled together, and there's what's called an equalization ratio, which is a function of the entire state's equalized pupils. So again, as that changes, it affects our equalized pupils. So it's not as quite, it doesn't always equal a 1-to-1.
Okay, next question from Tina Wright. Has there been discussion on the impact if Ripton and Weybridge request to remove themselves from districts if approved?
Peter, or did you want to?
Yeah, well, I'm just kind of, so we don't know in terms of what the financial impact would be. We expect that we actually just put information on our website, and I believe it's right on the main page. I believe it's called FAQs on Secession, to try to answer some of the questions like this one. So there is a long paragraph in terms of what we think the financial impact would be to those towns, in which we kind of extrapolated from FY17, looked ahead to FY21, and tried to make a determination around what the impact would be. So take a look at that and check that out. In terms of what the impact would be to the ACSD budget going into next year, we don't have that information. I would expect that it would be at least level impact for ACSD, but again, I don't know because we haven't crunched those numbers.
Hey, Peter, a heads up.
Yeah.
I have to switch over a connectivity thing, so if I lose you, I'll be right back on.
Okay. Another question, as Peter pointed out, in a couple of years, the high school will graduate its largest class of 162, after which the total MUHS enrollment will likely be less than 500, though they currently account for approximately 43% of the facility cost. It seems as though we should be also focused on a plan for possibly sharing the space at the high school. Possibly the Community College of Vermont could move into the high school, and the district level administrative offices could also be moved into the high school. Yeah, good statement. Definitely, we aren't lacking in space. We previously, as many know, we used to have MUHS and MOMS in the same building. So that is certainly something that we would be, looking at in terms of sharing space and things like that in the future. Tina Wright, last question. Has anyone on the board considered reversing the move of 6th grade to MUMS? Specifically, how the reversal at this time may be in best interest for less of an impact during a pandemic. It really puts a burden on the outlying schools as well as MUMS. My specific question is, has the reversal been considered? I guess speaking from my vantage point, I don't think it's been considered, just in that we've put now a year and a half into that transition, and feel like to make a reversal now and to postpone it, I don't think personally would be in the best interest of students and for the work that the team at MUMS has done. Certainly the transition, as any transition, takes a lot of energy. Andrew, I think, spoke pretty eloquently to the considerations that the MUMS staff and the MUMS community have been looking at and trying to figure out this transition. So I think, kind of given all the different factors, I think it makes sense to continue down the current path, and I think it's what's best for students. Will the 6th grade now be considered secondary ed instead of elementary? If so, doesn't it impact the equalized pupil count?
It is not considered secondary, so secondary students are grades 7 through 12. It doesn't matter if they're in a middle school model or not. The same thing is true of our announced tuition, which we'll be doing at the next meeting. So elementary is K-6 and secondary is 7-12 in the eyes of the AOE in terms of funding and weighting. But I don't see how it would affect our overall equalized pupil count, because those students are still counted in our overall enrollment. If we were going to receive additional weighting for them, that would be helpful, of course, but that's not the case.
Another question, am I correct to observe that if ACSD exceeds the state spending threshold, the financial effect will be multiplied and felt disproportionately across the towns depending on their CLA? In other words, the lower the CLA, the higher the increased tax burden.
Yeah, the lower the CLA, the higher the tax rate is in relation to the district tax rate. You also have to consider change in CLA from year to year. So even though Ripton, for example, has a CLA below 90, it was also at 90 or below 90. It was similar last year. So even though they have a similar CLA to Salisbury, they're not feeling the effect quite as much because of the change year to year.
Okay, there's a one-word question here. I don't know. Let me invite her over to.
It might be referring back to her other question.
Yeah, I'm just inviting her over so she can ask the question. Hi, Tina. You're over as a panelist. Oh, okay. So next question, how has the administration advocated raising the state per pupil spending threshold? So we don't impact the spending threshold is set by the state. It's actually was, I believe it was established 6 years ago, and has been used it was first, when it was first created, it was an average spending, and that went up by the need after that. In terms of school districts and following that, I think it's, the board and boards previously in ACSD had looked at the threshold as kind of a target, and I think that was the initial intention of that threshold, was to establish a target for districts to know, like, are we spending too much? Are we spending enough? And the state is also looking at needing to raise all of that revenue to run schools. So without any kind of structure to provide a, kind of an area for school boards to target, I think it was challenging. So that the threshold has worked in a way to help districts determine kind of are they spending at about the right amount. And I think that's the conversation that boards have had over the years in ACSD is looking at the threshold and saying, okay, we're this far away, we're doing well, we'll be okay going into next year with this and that. As we started talking about today a number of years ago, when we started saying, like, based on our current growth and based on our loss of equalized pupils, and you all know that number has consistently gone down as the elementary first dropped in the 2000s, and then secondary followed suit as those large classes moved through ACSD. So we saw this coming. I think we're responding to it now, and I think as I mentioned earlier, I think there's work that any district that's over the threshold is doing. I don't know of districts, larger districts. There may be single town districts in the state that are spending way over the threshold and not thinking about it, but I don't know of any large districts like us that are spending above the threshold and just not worrying about it. So again, we're in a situation where we want to provide what's best for students. We also know what the tax burden is for people, and we're in a really challenging situation. And there's absolutely no easy solution to get out of it. So we have to keep looking at. Yeah.
Peter and Brittany, just to clarify for folks, even if the state spending threshold was elevated, at the end of the day, the money that we have access to spend on education has to come from someplace. And someone saying you can spend more, okay, but then more money has to come from someplace. Correct? Is that a fair interpretation?
Yeah, I mean, our tax rate increase, even without the double taxation, would be around 9 cents. So it's still substantial. Yeah.
So I do think it's important that we keep in the backs of our minds that the threshold is one lever that is a part of this process. But if we just remove that checks and balance, it doesn't fix all of the issue. Fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the state is in a position where it can't raise the funds to, Peter Conlon probably knows this better, having, worked directly on this, but yeah, I mean, without any kind of threshold, and every district can vote to spend what it wants, obviously that money has to come from taxation, and that's where the challenge is.
Oh, and turn this off. Brush your teeth. Oh my God, I cannot believe you're going to unbed. Oh my God, it's so far past your bedtime.
Peter, can you?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Perfect, thank you.
While Peter's doing that, just to add on to that conversation, I'm going to turn my video off here. It's important to remember that the state does not control the spending. It funds whatever the local districts decide to spend.
Right.
So as you say, if everybody just spends as they want, the state has to raise all that money, and it comes from, ultimately sales tax is capped at whatever people spend. The only lever in that fundraising area is property taxes.
A question about pre-K. Research consistently shows the importance of preschool for learning readiness. How will ACSD ensure equity for pre-K students from Ripton and Salisbury who are losing their pre-K programs? Yeah, I mean, I think this is a problem we've had in ACSD all along, is that we currently have 2 full-time programs, and we actually next year are looking to make sure we can maximize those 2, the Mary Hogan and Bridport programs, to think of this kind of as an east side and west side of ACSD programs, to have almost kind of like regional centers for pre-K. We did not have full enrollment this year at Bridport, and we have historically taken students from other towns, mostly from Shoreham, at Bridport schools. So that is something going into next year in terms of how we're ensuring equity. We're going to be working to make sure that folks that need the access either get it there or continue to work with, as I mentioned earlier, private providers. We don't have equity in terms of programming, and we haven't had equity in ACSD. Shoreham hasn't had a program. Cornwall hasn't had a program. Weybridge hasn't had a program. So that's something that I think we are working towards, and it's a challenging one, because when we talk to all the folks in pre-K in Addison County, and we've got a really strong group of educators, in that field in Addison County, and I think the state actually looks to Addison County as an example in this area. I mentioned earlier, they tell us that we actually don't need schools taking this on and providing all of these. They in some ways, providing universal pre-K and providing support for families to attend the private programs sounds like more of the more of the direction. So I know that's something that, as Mount Ebe and Addison Northwest have been talking recently about pre-K. That's what they also talked about. I think Mount Ebe talked about starting a program at, was it Beeman potentially? But one of the things that the superintendent there said was, along the same lines, our private providers have told us that we should not be, trying to grow these programs because we have the structures and the resources and the ability to serve these students. So I think it is something, I don't think we're there yet. I don't think ACSD is there in terms of pre-K. I think we have work to do, and we have to engage the pre-K folks. And we, each year we've kind of looked at it and said, okay, are we ready to kind of like make a move and create either a single program or look at regional programs? And it's something that I think we have to determine, and it is, I think Jen mentioned this earlier, it's definitely connected to the facilities master plan and what is the long-term vision. I think that will, really greatly help us to determine where is the need and how do we serve that need, and is serving that need providing the programming, or is it supporting our private providers? That's the part that I think needs to be answered. Mary, how are we doing on time?
I think if we took one, is there any more? If we probably have time for one or more, and then we'll jump to the next item on the agenda.
There's a quick one. Do you mind, Peter?
Go ahead.
It says, can you please remind us what percentage of ACSD spending footprint is teacher salary versus administration versus facilities? Oh, I guess that's not as quick as I thought. I was going to say that total salaries and benefits is about 80%. And you can see on the budget summary that one of the documents that I prepared as a draft, sort of the breakdown of student instruction versus district office administration. But I can come back with that in terms of salary and benefits.
Great.
Next meeting.
Super.
Peter, or Mary, I thought it might be worth going back to, I don't know if Cheryl is still on the call, but from her comments initially, I wondered, Peter, if you could speak a little bit about revenue generation. I don't know if she's aware or not of there is an organization in Addison County, I think it's CEEF, is that correct?
It's ASIF, yeah.
ASIF. That raises money from private donations, and teachers can apply for grants to for things for their classroom and that sort of thing. But my understanding is that type of fundraising can't be used sort of to decrease budget or as revenue generation. Could one of you speak to?
Yeah, you're correct. It runs afoul of Act 60, right, Peter? So it's basically for enrichment, things above and beyond what would normally be provided. It can't offset salaries and benefits. Basically says that the local community can't contribute directly to the funding of schools because it's a statewide funding system.
And the reason that was put in place was one of the issues was the towns with more means historically had all the things they needed, and the towns that couldn't raise those funds and didn't have those things. So part of the Brigham decision was to try to equalize the access of communities to the resources they needed for their schools. You know, the place that Act 60 didn't quite make it there, even though it's looked upon as, or was looked upon as an equitable approach to funding, was that if you look across the state and if you look at how much towns are spending, you know, generally those with greater means are more comfortable being taxed more to spend more. So the act, which was meant to raise all levels to the same place, still has, because it's a statewide formula, those that have chosen to be more frugal and are spending less are still paying for part of those that are paying more, because the state has to tax everybody together and then reallocate those funds.
Okay. First and foremost, thank you to the team, to the principals who have dedicated countless hours in helping to bring together the plans and opportunities in very challenging times. All of you spoke consistently about being called to weather change and lead through transition. And honestly, given where we are and what we are going through as a community and as a country, I would be surprised if that wasn't what we were having to deal with. But the way in which you are doing it and the spirit and passion that you are bringing to it is truly remarkable. And so we thank you very much for that dedication. And to Brittany and your team, this is, you know, it's hard when the numbers don't add up the way you want them to add up. And trying to find solutions that are palatable and responsible is a really tough charge. And so we thank you for the patience and diligence that you and your team are bringing to this work. We're going to get there. We're going to figure this out, and we're going to do what's right for kids. And we're going to do it in a way that is sustainable and that serves this community as best we can. And so we want to thank you for that work. We have a couple action items from other questions that we didn't quite get to that we'll follow up on and make sure that they're posted on the FAQ. We're going to transition now into the report of the board and updates on things like the facilities master plan, and we'll highlight additional FAQs that are up there. I think this opportunity to have the back and forth with the community during the meeting has been very productive, and I want to thank everybody who has participated from a community perspective, and we will continue to try to find ways to have these types of productive conversations. So thank you all very much. With that, we're going to jump to the next item on the agenda, which is to discuss as a board the potential of revising the facilities master plan timeline. And with that, I will turn it over to Victoria.
Great, thank you. I know you've all been sitting there already for a long time, so don't feel embarrassed if you have to blank your screen to get up and do some jumping jacks, or don't even blank your screen, just get up and do jumping jacks. I get it. So I just had a few words that I had written down before we get into the timeline, just because my forte is not public speaking on the fly, so bear with me. I know that you're all feeling the pressure of the decisions to come. I feel it too. This is hard work. We are charged with budgeting for this district's children in a way that will provide a sound education and opportunities for all of them. Our current configuration is not sustainable. With 80% of our budget being personnel, we know that we will have to cut staff. And in order to cut fewer staff and provide our students access to all they need, we need to address the fact that our footprint is larger than necessary for the student population we serve. The factors that came together to create this situation are frustratingly beyond the realm of the work this board is empowered to do. It is a result of state declining population, increasing needs of our student body, a funding structure that makes voters believe they have local control when they don't, ever rising healthcare costs, as well as other financial costs, set financial costs. It feels at times like a no-win situation. But then I look at what we're trying to do with the facilities master plan amidst this chaos, and I see years of work and thoughtful debate. I see smart, dedicated, forward-thinking staff at the central office. I see teachers and administrators doing their jobs well. I see community members helping in innumerable ways. And I see kids engaged in learning to be inquisitive, thoughtful members of this and the world community. I know there is no magic solution, but I do believe that we are stronger together as one district. That together, we can provide a great education at a sustainable cost. By saying this, I don't mean to take away from the enormous loss some towns will feel. I understand that our schools are not just buildings where kids are educated, but rather community meeting places where lives are shared and relationships built. I hope that by staying together, we can help each other to reimagine the use of these buildings and keep them as places where people can continue to come find community, share experiences, and benefit the greater good. There is a lot going on. Many on this Zoom are working hard to provide residents of Weybridge and Ripton information on what secession would mean, so that voters are able to make educated decisions. Since our last meeting, I have received feedback from the board, our community, about the timeline presented. I've spoken with Peter Burrows, Mary, Amy, the communications committee about extending the timeline until the end of this academic year so that we have adequate time to digest information from the transportation study and make decisions about bonding, secondary investments, sustainability, and school choice. An extended timeline will also allow for more community engagement and feedback. I know this isn't a surprise to you all, but I'd like to take some time now to get the board's feedback, answer questions, and ultimately get the approval for extending the timeline to the end of the school year. I think now, so you all received the email, or the board, I should say, received the email from Mary indicating that there was a special meeting of the Communications Engagement Committee to discuss this. So maybe first I can open it up to that committee if there's anything they want to add. But I then want to just get the board's feedback and questions on whether or not they feel this is appropriate and are willing to sort of give us the approval to come up with a detailed timeline that extends to the end of the academic year.
Amy McGlashan.
Sure. So let me fill in a little bit from that discussion. And for those who were participating in the last board meeting, and let me know if I need to turn off my video too, by the way. For those who were there at the last board meeting, we talked about, it felt really in terms of engagement, which was something that we.
Amy, you should turn off your video.
Okay. Is this better?
Yes.
We better now?
Yes. It's a great picture. Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry. So at that special meeting, we talked about different ways that we would engage community at different points in this process if we stretched it out a little bit. And we talked about both doing sort of like we did tonight, where we would have opportunities for community to engage while we're discussing a particular topic. And then we would also look at what are some other ways that we need to do, hold community fora of some kind when it's time to do an update of sorts, and for them to process, for us to process together, I should say, maybe the more gestalt of it all. So once the facilities committee does a redo of the timeline, and then our job as the communications and engagement committee would be then to plug in what those instances will look like and when. I also want to just add, as long as before we turn it over to everybody else, I think this is maybe the 4th time that we've extended the timeline, and I think it's a good thing. We said at the beginning, this is going to be an iterative process, that we're learning as we go. There's always more information. At some point, we need to say at what point do we have enough information to make decisions, but we're not there yet. And my concern would be making sure that we give our educators enough time on the other side of that to do the planning for implementation. And it may be that it may be that we have to delay implementation because we don't have that, and it's not something, it's not the great solution, but I feel like we'll get to that once we get through this. Anyway, so I'm that's my 2 cents.
Great, thanks, Amy.
Members want to add anything?
Anyone else from those committees?
I would just say that part of our goal in having a detailed plan of what we'll talk about at each meeting, we'd like to really try to broadcast that so that the community is aware of what we're discussing at each of our meetings, and can therefore really be in the forefront of the discussions as they happen in real time, and be able to offer the feedback in real time. So part of our job, in addition to creating the bigger forum, is going to be advertising and communicating widely which topics we'll be talking about and potentially voting about at each meeting.
Yep. Chip?
I would say, as Amy said, we've stretched this out all for the right reasons, and I agree that going to the end of the academic year is probably the best way to go. But I think at times we have to say this has to be it. Okay, this decision has to be made at some point, and my comments before about doing it before town meeting day or new board members or whatever was really because I didn't want new board members, if they were elected to come on, would be totally faced with a decision that they hadn't been had no part in coming together with. So pushing this out to the end of the academic year does away with that particular learning curve as best you can. But I also really think at some point you can never have all the information you can possibly want because you can't predict the future. And at some point we have to make a decision, and I would advocate that we set it for the end of the academic year and we would make those decisions then.
Great. Victoria, you want to open it up to the rest of the board at this point to comment and ask questions?
Absolutely.
Super. Any other board members with comments or questions? Mary G.
I'm really grateful that you've made this decision to extend the timeline. And I really like the question and answer session today, because I feel like it's more respectful to at least have some kind of back and forth engagement with our community. So I applaud you for taking this and extending it. I think it's a really good idea. And thank you for the question and answer session as well. Thank you.
Other comments or questions from the rest of the board?
So if nobody has.
I see Kyle.
Who?
Kyle had his hand up.
Oh, I missed you, Kyle. Sorry.
That's okay, Chairwoman Mary. Thank you. I would just say that in the interest of the students, students all across Vermont have gone through a tremendous amount of change this year. And our ACSD students have gone through a tremendous amount of change, that is. And I would just like to say that although I am a non-voting member of this board,
Oh, Kyle, I lost you. Can other people hear him?
No, I lost him.
Kyle, we lost your audio.
Turn his camera off and try it.
gratification.
Oh, you're back.
To ensure that we are at the proper point where we can proceed.
Kyle, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Could you, unfortunately, I'm sure it was great, but we didn't hear it. Could you repeat what you just said?
Sure.
Maybe lean in. It sounded like your mic just didn't pick up on sound and turned off.
Yeah.
Certainly. I would just add that I think students have gone through a tremendous amount of change this year, and particularly our ACSD students. And although I'm a non-voting member of this board, it is my sincere hope that the deadline be extended until the end of this academic year. Sometimes it's better to delay gratification to ensure the best outcome for our students and our larger community. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you. We got it all. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Mary G.
Sorry, I forgot to add this piece on. I really liked what Fernanda said regarding getting input from the teachers. I think they are really the experts at what's going on with the kids, and I would love to hear their thoughts on the whole process as well. So that was my other piece I forgot to mention.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions or comments, I'm going to take that as approval of extending the timeline till the end of the academic year. Is that fair? See some thumbs up. Good. All right, is that as official as we need it to be, Mary?
I believe it is.
Excellent. There will be a facilities committee meeting tomorrow where we will talk more specifically about sort of the goals and the stages of the plan, and our hope, our desires to have it be more detailed than what we've seen in the past, to reflect things like what Amy was talking about in terms of public engagement, and also having it set up so that the board really understands at what point they need to be comfortable with the information given, and at what point they'll be asked to vote on various stages of the remainder of the process.
Great. All right, thank you very much, Victoria, and thanks to everyone. I think the information that the feedback and the conversations that you shared during the board meeting last time, as well as the opportunity to hear from our community, I think has informed us well. And I think we're moving in the right direction here. So Victoria, thank you all very much. Next on the agenda, we have been asked.
There's a hand up for Amy McGlashan.
Where? Oh, sorry, Amy.
Sorry, that's okay. No, so my video, hang on. I do want, because this is coming up in our town conversations, the question about what happens to the building when we close these schools, and other kinds of questions that are really part of the implementation. And I don't know if you want to comment on this at all, Victoria, in terms of just to be clear about, we're going to have a plan, but it's not going to be detailed where those things are going to be presupposed. I mean, that's all part of what happens in the implementation, just as we're planning for how kids are going to get moved, or how choice is going to be implemented if we decide to vote on to approve that. I don't know if you want to just comment on that, just to clarify. We're voting on a plan, we hope in June or thereabouts, but it's not going to have every detail spelled out. It's going to be a plan. It's going to be a framework that we're going to be used to guiding our decisions from that point forward. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, exactly. I think that the plan, as a written document, is exactly that. Is going to be a framework. It's going to be, the board is voting on a vision and a framework, and that after that vote will be the implementation process. And in tomorrow's meeting, we will talk in more depth about sort of the different pieces of both of those stages. But implementation is where we see, where do the boundaries exactly lie, and what do the bus routes look like, and how's the staffing model going to look in each school, and what maintenance needs to be done before kids move into the school, and all of those sorts of things. Those are not going to be included in the facilities master plan. Peter, do you want to speak more to that?
I mean, I think you've kind of covered it. I think, I think that's part of the conversation, frankly, tomorrow, and talking through the timeline is, I think it would be helpful for the facilities committee and the board as a whole to be really explicit about what the outcome level is, so that, one community member doesn't think, when the plan is finished, I'm going to know these things, and another community member is having to interpret, I'm going to know these things. So I think that falls to, it falls to us to be as clear as we can about what that framework is, and then what happens after that. And I think we've talked about the different phases, the implementation phase and all that. But I think, again, like the kind of like more granular level around what gets done by the end of the plan, and then what follows. So yeah, agree.
Peg Martin.
It seems to me we have two towns who are not willing at this point to go along with this. At least there is a vote that will be taken. I don't know what the outcome of that is. I suspect, I have my suspicions, but I don't know. None of us does know. And it strikes me that one of the things that would be helpful would be for the entire district to know what a separation would look like, what would have to happen. And Amy, I know that you are working with a group to inform your community. I'm not sure what's happening in Weybridge, but the vote has been duly warned. It strikes me that we owe these folks who have put it together a degree of respect, that we should go ahead and we should plan. And we should do exactly, in my book anyway, what Victoria and her committee are looking at. At the same time, I think we need to show some respect, is the only word I can come up with, to these communities. And not just make rolling along assumptions until we know that that is exactly what we can do as a board without any kind of a complication.
I agree. I think that's an important point, that part of extending the timeline, I think, allows a little breathing room for these communities to, you know, have a full process around voting. And you know, as I said, I know a lot of people on this call have put a lot of work in to try to help inform voters in those towns. But I do think part of the reason why I'm comfortable with extending the timeline is that I feel it gives not only Ripton and Weybridge, but the other communities a little breathing room to figure out what exactly secession would mean, and how that would impact, you know, all the towns and their students.
I completely agree. It seems to me that it is important to make that a very, very upfront kind of an understanding, and that this is the way the board is looking at it. If there's a lot of water that's gone over the dam, and some of it I think is unfortunate, maybe didn't have to happen, but it has, and there we are.
And so, Peg, I appreciate those comments, and it's a good segue into, if there are no other comments specifically on the extension of timeline, into the next item on the agenda. We've been specifically asked as a board to provide a comment to an article that is being written in the Addison Independent regarding the two towns that are going to be voting with regards to secession from the district. And so a couple of things on this topic. Number one, as Peter mentioned briefly, we have put together, from a district perspective, a FAQ that speaks to questions around this topic that I believe now, Peter, is posted on the school board webpage on the ACSD site. And it lists a handful of questions that we think we know have been asked of some of our board members individually, and information that we wanted to make sure folks have access to as they consider these very important decisions. And there has been other supplemental, or not supplemental, but other FAQs that have been provided as well that are town specific. And so we wanted to make sure that we were able to support that effort in informing the populace as they make these decisions. And so we really encourage folks to take a look at that and to reach out if you have additional questions. With regards to the Addison Independent, what I thought would be, I don't know, a process to go about responding as a board with a comment is to propose two options that are in draft format to get a sense of where the board feels would be an appropriate comment to provide to the independent. And hopefully we as a board could come to a consensus on one of these comments. And while no one at 8:50 in the evening wants to be doing wordsmithing with commas and changing of individual words, I think we could probably get directionally I'm hoping we could get directionally comfortable with one of these comments. So on your screen that Peter has just shared, you'll see, again, draft language to respond. And so again, the topic of the article is the overall plans and efforts that have been made by Ripton and Weybridge to secede from ACSD, and what is the board's position or response or comment on this? And so option one, you know, I think option one probably takes almost a position in saying that we believe we're stronger together and puts language to that. So option one would be saying and communicating that we as a board believe that we want to move forward with all communities still a part of ACSD. And option two takes less of a position and says that, puts language around, we obviously are respecting the rights of individuals, towns to secede, and we're going to be awaiting the outcomes. And while we await those outcomes, we're going to continue to try to address the challenges that we are facing in a collaborative and thoughtful manner. So both we try to honor and respect, I think, in our comments, the understanding and deep challenges that we're all facing, and do so in a respectful way. Option one is saying, however, that we're hoping that we can move together, we move forward stronger, and option two does not state that hope. It doesn't state another hope, but it doesn't it doesn't specifically say that. And so I tossed this out there to start off with discussion, and if folks could speak to which they are more comfortable with, that would be super helpful. And if you want to do that by raising your hand.
You want me to take the screen share off so you can see people?
No, that's okay. Because I want people to be able to
kind
of like look through it.
Yes. Yep.
I just lost what was on the screen. Chip, I see your hand. Oh, you're back. Chip, you're on mute.
I'm totally in favor of option number one.
Great.
I think, to me, that's a strong statement. I would be hard pressed to think that even though we respect the way towns have the ability to secede if they so vote, and we so vote to allow them, I can't believe that anybody on this board would not be in favor of seeing this learning community stay together as it is at this point. And I think the second one's a little too, just doesn't speak to that in the same way. So I'm totally in favor of option number one. I would not be in favor of two.
Other comments? Peter C.
I would agree with that. I think it really captures the spirit of why we became a merged district. I don't think it's challenging anybody's right to have a position, but just to say, I think it's a very positive statement that, you know, we've been together and we would like to continue together. So I agree with option one. Also, just because we have succession in the top and secede below and all that, I guess I'm a bigger fan of the term withdraw rather than secede, succeed, however you want to say it.
Other comments? Mary G.
I strongly agree with option one because of the staying together as a group, because I just think we are stronger together, and it's better for all of our students when they end up in the secondary school if we grow together. So I'm definitely option one.
Thanks, Mary G. Victoria.
I agree also with option one, and I would hope, I don't know if we would add it into this or just communicate with John Flowers that, or whoever's writing the article, that that we are working to help these towns understand, you know, answer their questions or whatever, that we're working to provide information. I mean, I'm assuming that he'll include the new link to the FAQs or whatever, but I would
Yeah, we can make sure that that's, yeah.
You're talking to him directly right now. He's an attendee.
Oh, good. Oh, hi, John. Great. Well, yes, I definitely think that we should have the link to the FAQs because I think that's an important piece to this.
Amy.
I mean, given that is, we've called ourselves in Ripton the group that's advocating a no vote next week. But in part, I mean, this is why we became a district, and it reflects years of trying to work together to consolidate, to increase efficiencies, to consolidate costs. I mean, the becoming of a district was kind of the next step that we were preparing ourselves for. And we're demonstrating that, in fact, we are stronger together, and that we have, I mean, we just spent an hour and I don't even know how long talking about a budget that while the closing of particular schools isn't addressing, it's not a concrete number, it's all about the reallocation of resources to better meet the needs of kids. And we can only do that when we're together. The other reason why option one, I think, is the only way to say it, which is to say this makes us sad. It makes us sad that if we lose Weybridge and Ripton, and so be it if it's the will of the voters, not just in those towns, but across the district. But it doesn't change the fact that this is what we believe, and that we think our kids are going to be the ones to lose out. So.
Great. Thank you. Jen, I think you raised your hand, but when you put it in the black, it goes away. So
I think it's the black hole of outer space.
Sorry about that.
No problem at all. So I'm really glad to hear people feeling comfortable sort of taking the stand of, feeling like we want everybody to stay together and we feel like we're a stronger district together. My only concern and possibly suggestion, and it's not wordsmithing, it's more general, is just, and I get that it's Weybridge and Ripton in particular who are voting at this time. My feeling, though, is that there are some concerns held by folks outside of Weybridge and Ripton together. So for that reason, I sort of like some of the first sentence of the second one because I feel like it's more inclusive. So that would be my only suggestion is to, possibly recognize that it's Weybridge and Ripton at this point, but perhaps be more inclusive that there are concerns throughout the district beyond those two towns.
Yep. And we can add, I think that's a great point, Jen. We can add those two ideas. I think because the article is specific to our comment on secession, we'll keep those two towns, if it's okay, in there, but add the concerns are also the entire community. Perfect. Other comments? Anything from folks we haven't heard from? Should I assume from folks that we haven't heard from that you're not in favor of number one?
Mary.
Who said Mary? Hold on.
Suzanne.
Oh, Suzanne.
Sorry. So no, I mean, everyone has, as they've spoken about option one, they've really hit the nail on the head, that these are truly the feelings of those of us that worked so hard to bring us all together, feeling that we were stronger as a collaborative group rather than individual little learning communities. And so I agree. Number one does definitely state our point and our feelings, but I do also acknowledge what Jen said, that Weybridge and Ripton, yes, have taken the stance of doing the vote, but there are others out there that question, and so as long as we make sure that we try not to make Weybridge and Ripton feel like they're the poster child, but acknowledging that there's others out there, this is great. Thank you.
Great. Jory?
I will certainly echo support for option one. I appreciate that it comes from a place of strength. It's positive language, it's forward looking, it charts a path forward for us as a district together.
Any other comments?
Davina has her hand up.
Davina.
No, I just would echo my support for option one, just echoing all the statements that everybody else has made in favor of option one.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Betty?
I also echo everyone's sentiments on option one. I would also comment on Jennifer's comment about including some of the language from option two, that we also respect the right of individual towns to secede. Maybe just adding, the word like respect in the first option. I know I'm not sure what the question was. It's not included on the.
It was simply to comment on the two towns that are seceding and what is the board's comment with regards to the secession.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I would comment.
Great, thank you. All right. So I'm going to take this then as we're in agreement that I can say that this reflects the board's opinion. If anyone does not want me to say that, now is your time to speak. Thank you all very much for that process. I appreciate it. Next on the agenda, the ID4 town lease. Peter B.
Yeah, so I'll talk about this a little bit and then hand it off to Brittany for specifics. But essentially, we have a running 25-year lease with the town. The town leases the rec fields next to Mary Hogan. We use it during the day. They use it, after school, weekends, etc. It also includes parts of the arena and over to the warming hut. In that area as well. It came up this year, and with everything going on, it felt like the town and we also felt that it made sense to just do a one-year extension and revisit it so we basically made some updates just from 25 years ago to today. Some things that needed to change that were just outdated, but we didn't make any substantial changes to the lease and felt like we needed more time to be able to sit together to kind of like envision the next 25 years essentially. So this is just a one-year extension of the lease to the town of Middlebury, and we'll come back to this again. So it's essentially taking our 25-year lease and extending it one more year, at which time we'll engage our Mary Hogan principals in looking at what's working, what's not working. We'll engage the town. We'll have some meetings to talk about it, to talk about how it best fits the needs of everyone in Middlebury. So Brittany's got the lease. Brittany, do you want anything you want to add?
Yeah, so I mean, the main things are that we had to update, the lease was between ID4 and the town of Middlebury, so ID4 no longer exists It's now ACSD. We took away some outdated language about, like, I think it referenced like a grant or something that has long since passed. You know, you can see that all the insurance requirements are still in place, and cleaning up some language. For example, it says the leased premises will be available to the general public for recreational use more than 50% of the available time. It also took away the clause that requires this lease be approved by the voters and allows the board to do it, which is much more common in these types of circumstances. It's really just cleaning up some language. That's it.
I thought it seemed pretty straightforward.
It's very straightforward, yeah.
I don't know, do we need to take a motion? I would approve the slight changes and the whole concept of just doing it for a year and then having a bigger discussion later.
Chip had a question on that. Peter, before we get into this, do you want to say anything to let the principals? Peter B.
Yeah. Principals, long day, long night. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night and see you all very soon.
Thank you, principals.
I'll second Victoria's motion.
I'll third it.
Great. All those in favor of extension of the year lease, raise your eye. Any opposed? So moved. Super. Any other on other for anyone?
Mary?
Yes, Lorraine.
Normally at this time of year, we discuss the positions that are going to be up for re-election and whether or not people are running, just so the public has an idea of whether, you know, seats are going to be open or not open. And so I'm wondering if, I think we have 4 people that are up for re-election. Is that correct? And maybe we could find out whether they are planning to run again so the public knows that.
Yeah, we do have 4 positions open.
And I'm not sure, I mean, I haven't chatted with, I'm not sure folks have made that decision yet.
Well, what can we tell people what positions are available?
Yeah. Peter B, do you want to?
Sure, there are 2 Middlebury positions, 1 Cornwall and 1 Shoreham.
What's the deadline for filing? Do you know?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure.
It's usually like around the 15th or something, isn't it?
I think it might be like near the end of January. It's like, I think it's like 5 weeks or 6 weeks before.
Yeah, I think it's more the end.
Yeah,
Okay.
I thought we had
Something
one
like
more,
the 23rd or something like that.
I thought we had one more board meeting before that deadline.
Yeah, we have a meeting next Monday. I'll talk to Sharon tomorrow, since she's the collector of all that information with the dates and everything, and have her reach out to everybody.
Sharon did send those of us who are up, I think, the paperwork that we need to fill out, because this year
Okay.
Petitions and signatures aren't required.
Oh, I was wondering about that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
That makes it easy.
And I don't mind saying my seat is up and I will be running for another 3-year term.
Great. Any other questions or comments on other? All right, so with that, a motion?
To adjourn.
Great, Suzanne, motion to adjourn. I saw that hand first. Thank you all for a great meeting. I really appreciate it. And enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.